Sodor Railway is a very busy railway and must keep its trains running on time. Signals help the railway do just that. As all railways do, Sir Topham Hatt's railway has lots and lots of signals. Signals to tell engines and their crew when to stop, when to go, and if there are accidents on the line. One afternoon, Percy was waiting at a signal. He had taken a train of milk to Edward Station and wanted to get back to the shed to rest his wheels, but they had been waiting for a long time at the signal.
Stupid old thing.
Whatever are you talking about, Percy?
Signals at every station, every curve, every hill, even in the yard. I think that every signal should just be done away with.
Now, Percy, you remember what happened to James. He said the same thing and a huge storm came and took out all our signals. We were delayed for hours.
Finally, the signal changed.
Come along, Percy.
His driver removed the brake.
About time.
In the days after that, Percy grew crosser still. Everywhere he looked, signals, signals, and even more signals.
Ugh.
There was yet again a red signal. Percy had to stop. Thomas arrived shortly.
Hello, Percy. How are you?
Thomas, have you ever wondered why signals are here?
Well, I know they direct traffic and keep us engines safe.
That answer was not good enough for Percy.
Thomas, have you ever wanted to go past a red signal?
Percy, surely you're not thinking of...
Have you, Thomas?
Yes, of course. But I would never do it. Percy, you remember when I passed a danger notice and fell down a mine? Or when you passed a danger sign and fell into the sea? If all that happened because we went past the sign, just imagine what would happen if we passed the signal.
I am, Thomas. That's why I'm going to pass one and see what happens.
Percy.
Never mind, Thomas. I'll see you at the sheds.
Percy's signal changed and he started quickly.
Percy. Oh dear.
Later in the sheds, Thomas had told Toby what Percy had said.
He's just being daft. No engine should or should want to run a red signal.
Percy arrived.
Hello, Toby. Thomas?
Percy's driver and fireman said goodbye to the engines, and then they headed home. Once they had left, Toby spoke up.
Percy, what's all this talk of passing signals?
What happens if you pass one? That's all I want to know.
I'll tell you what happens. Everyone knows Mavis, right?
Yes, of course. What about her?
Well, when she first came to Sodor, she was a lot like you, Percy.
Really? What do you mean?
When Mavis first came to Sodor, she too wanted to run a signal.
Did she?
I'll tell you.
And Toby did.
When Mavis first came to Sodor, she was young, inexperienced. Sir Topham Hatt asked me to teach her the routes on the branch lines, and teach her about trucks, and of course, signals. Mavis learned the quarry lines quickly. She and her driver soon knew where all the trucks went. She did wonderfully with the trucks, but the thing she would not listen to was about signals. Of course, no engine can go without signals, but she would not listen to me. One day, Mavis made a plan. She asked the trucks if they'd pull her over the points when the signal turned red. Mavis should have known she couldn't trust the trucks, but she didn't care.
Well, what happened?
Well, Thomas, she was shunting when the signal changed from green to red. The trucks pulled her over the points, just like she asked. Now she was stuck. Half of her trucks were on Henry's line, and half on her own. But there was trouble. Henry came around the bend. There was a horrible crash.
What was it?
It was poor Henry crashing into Mavis and her trucks. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but Mavis's buffers and cowcatchers were badly damaged, and the trucks were in pieces. Sir Topham Hatt came, and once Mavis's driver and fireman had told him what had happened, he was very cross and sent her to the works in disgrace.
Then what happened?
She went to the works and was repaired about 3 months later. But one thing's for sure, she'll never run a red signal again. Now, Percy, are you still going to try and run a red signal?
No.
And for the rest of the night, no one talked of signals. The next morning, Percy was at Vicarstown. He was waiting for a red signal. Percy hadn't been feeling well. That morning his brake lever had been stiff. The driver had to pull it back tighter than usual to get it to hold. His driver and fireman were in the brake van discussing the run ahead with the guard. Just as his driver and fireman had left for the brake van, the lever slid a little. The fireman had to put the brake on instead, and he hadn't done it correctly. Percy thought he had felt something, but he wasn't sure. Soon he felt as if he were moving. The guard, driver, and fireman had felt it too, and ran towards Percy.
Help me, I'm moving!
The driver pulled the brake lever as fast as he could. Percy stopped.
Well, Percy, you finally did it.
Did what?
You've passed a red signal.
I did?
Then there was trouble. Percy was too close to the points. Edward was coming by with a good strain. Edward's buffer beam and Percy's running plate smacked into each other. There was a dreadful grinding sound.
Ow!
Edward's driver shut off steam. Edward stopped.
Percy, are you okay?
Percy was fine, but the paint on his running board was scraped and scratched.
I'm okay.
Percy asked his driver and fireman not to tell Thomas and Toby what had happened. They agreed, but Edward had already told Toby at the junction, and Toby had told Thomas. Percy backed into the sheds. After his driver and fireman had gone, Toby spoke up.
Well, Percy. I thought you weren't going to run a red signal after hearing of Mavis.
Percy kept quiet.
So, Percy, did you find out what happens if you pass a red signal?
Thomas asked mockingly. Percy didn't answer. Toby and Thomas both looked at Percy's running board. The paint was scraped.
Well then, Toby, do you know what happens if you run a red signal?
Yes, you can get into scrapes.
Toby and Thomas made jokes and laughed all night long, but Percy thought that they were just being silly.